And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It's the best day of the week because it's the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. I'm Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. And as usual, we have a fantastic show for you today. There is no other show like the Climate Realism Show, streaming anywhere in the world. So I hope you will like, share, and subscribe, and also personally tell folks about it. Word of mouth still works as to let people know what's going on. And so the more the merrier that we have in our live stream, in our live chats on YouTube and Rumble, the better. And before we get started with our show today, because big tech and the legacy media do not like the way we cover climate and energy news and policy on this very program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS, heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for The Climate Realism Show. And then you can help support the show so that it continues to happen every week. And also, this is something new and I think going to be continuing. I want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, and Climate Depot. These are some of the Heartland Institute's best friends in the climate realism space. They do fantastic work with us, have worked with us for years, and do a lot of work on their own to fight climate alarmism as well. So visit and bookmark their websites. Follow them on X, where we're streaming right now through their accounts. And along with this show, it's those sites and those places are going to be everything you need to get the truth about the climate that breaks through all of the hype and all of the lies. So thank you to Junk Science and CFACT and Climate Depot. And of course, thank you, whatsupwiththat.com, who is also every week live streaming this on their website, whatsupwiththat.com. So let's get it started. Today we have with us, as usual, Dr. H. Sterling Burnett, Director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. We have Anthony Watts, the Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of aforementioned whatsupwiththat.com. And of course, Linnea Lueken, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy and the star of our Climate at a Glance video series here on the Heartland Institute YouTube channel and on Rumble. Be sure to check those out for 1 or 2 videos every single week. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday to you. I prefer to think of us as the gang of 3 for climate,
Gang of 3.
We need a kind of a nefarious name, for the group.
Yeah, well, the 3 climate amigos. Maybe people in the chat could start coming up with some.
Yeah, well, I think usually how that works is your enemies have to come up with something like that. I think climate. Oop, there goes my lights freaking out from the power fluctuations. I think that
climate change is affecting Linnea.
Yeah, climate change is coming after me today.
No, it's the alarmists. They're trying to shut her down. She's too effective.
I live on an island, so every time the wind blows or it rains a little bit, my power has these big fluctuations and sometimes goes out entirely. So if I drop out, that's what happened to me.
But wait, don't you have windmills off the coast there?
Not here yet, thank goodness, but it's probably coming any day now.
I would call us the climate curmudgeons, but Linnea doesn't qualify, so
that's the gang of 1.
Yes. I think our enemies get to pick our name, though. Although,
they already have climate criminals, right?
Yeah, that's right. That was last week.
Yeah, last week we were all in the sights of being criminals. Of course, they've been thinking about us that way since the beginning, anyway.
But we are yet to be climate convicts. We may be criminals, but we haven't been caught and convicted.
Yeah. Well, Leah Lee, one of our commenters here on YouTube, said, "Aren't there 4 of you?" Come on, everybody knows I don't count. So, moving forward. All right, and actually, speaking of our enemies, we're going to start off with one of our favorite segments. Anthony's certainly his favorite segment, the crazy climate news of the week. And so, the first item here is that Google. This is from our friends at Media Matters. Hello, Media Matters. However, many of you are still employed there. Thanks for watching. They posted a story recently that said Google demonetized the Heartland Institute in June. Here are 4 more channels that appear to violate its misinformation policy. Now, Media Matters was thrilled when Google announced in 2021 that YouTube would prohibit, quote, ads for and monetization of content that contradicts well-established scientific consensus around the existence and causes of climate change. But researchers at Media Matters have found that large channels violate this policy. So, I guess the 3 or 4 people they still have employed there are still noticing the Heartland Institute's channel.
And they consider themselves researchers as opposed to just people who have nothing better to do than search Google all day.
Right, exactly right. And so they recently found, quote, one video criticizing Michael Mann, my word, on our channel, and it still had an ad running on it. And it was from an episode of a show about 6 months ago when we were covering the climate trial of the century, Mann versus Stein. And that episode of this program currently has more than 20,000 views. And it apparently, that was as of July 3rd, at least one video, it was still monetizing. Apparently, an outfit called Pacific Rim Athletics, a company that provides strength training programs, still had an ad running on our climate trial of the century video. So hello, Pacific Rim Athletics. If you want to be a sponsor of this show, just reach out. We'd be happy to have your support. But Media Matters continues, and they're just determined to be censors and to be anti-American. So that's what they're going to do. They said even after demonetizing the YouTube channel of climate denial think tank, the Heartland Institute, in June, other large channels still contain climate denial content that seemingly violates the platform's policies. And Media Matters found 4 examples. One was Tony Heller, which somebody in the comments had just mentioned that maybe he's not feeling too well lately. Good health to you, Tony. But he's been on this program. So congrats, Tony, if you're listening, for not yet being demonetized and shadow banned. We hope we didn't screw that up for you, but you may join us soon. Prager University, another very large channel. He's had people on his program, people in his videos, and we've had on this program, including Dr. Judith Curry and Chris Martz. That was considered bad by Media Matters. Jordan Peterson, who has not been on this program, we'd love to have him, but he interviewed also Dr. Curry on his channel, and Dr. Patrick Moore, who we have out on this channel. So you can see how some of the leading lights in climate realism just keep getting targeted by these leftist nut jobs. And then, of course, there's the 4th one as an example was John Stossel. Heartland's worked with John Stossel a lot over the years. We did a climate debate. We attempted, I should say, a climate debate in New York City. We invited Michael Mann and some others. None of them showed up. So we had Willie Soon, David Legates, and the late, great Pat Michaels debate empty chairs. It was quite a lot of fun in Times Square. So, maybe this is a little self-serving, but I just wanted to point out that, that this kind of programming, big tech, very powerful, and all of their little flying monkeys that pretend to be fact checkers are out there trying to shut us down and shut us up. I guess it's good news, Anthony, that some of our best friends in this movement who also communicate these issues are not yet being crushed by Google and YouTube like we are, right?
Right. It reminds me that when there is a threat to a religion, it's not religions like, some of the religions out there, you cannot criticize them. They will not tolerate criticism of their one true belief, whatever it might be. And so that's the situation that we're in. Climate change has become essentially a religion. It cannot be criticized, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how outrageous the demands or the expectations are. And so, even when we criticize the most incorrigible climate proponent, Michael Mann, that's not tolerable. And so basically, I think what this proves, Media Matters, is that you're involved in a religious crusade.
I've long argued it was more akin to a religion. I mean, they make predictions that contradict each other. It's going to be hotter 100 years from now. It's going to be colder 100 years from now. It's going to the hurricanes will be worse. Hurricanes will be declining. Bigger monsoons, lesser monsoons. That's kind of anti-physics. You can't have two diametrically opposed occurrences at the same time in the same place. So it's long been a religion. They don't even tolerate refutation of claim with evidence and facts. In other words, data doesn't count. It's the one science that I'm aware of where data is superfluous. When data and theory collide, we're supposed to believe the theory. And I just got to ask a question. When is there a scientific consensus that no one can criticize Michael Mann? What's that have to do with climate science? He's a personality. He's a scientist who's made certain claims. And but I've never heard of, if I criticize Sigmund Freud or Albert Einstein, should I be demonetized because that is violates the consensus of science? No, that violates the dogmatic teachings of this climate religion is what it violates.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, if you don't think it's permissible to criticize religion, you must not have seen the Olympics opening ceremonies this year.
Well, no, I didn't want to watch. I knew ahead of time that there was going to be some shenanigans, because I read a lot of different feeds and so forth, and I tuned out before it even started. And, that's really the only way we can tune out some of this nonsense. Just don't look at it. Don't give them the eyeballs. Don't give them the advertiser revenue, from the eyeballs. Two can play at this game. But my viewpoint is that, the kind of stuff that's gone on in the Olympics doesn't belong in the Olympics. I mean, the Olympics is about sportsmanship. It's about excellence. It's about competition. It's not about climate. It's not about LGBTQT, whatever. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about those three things. And they seem to have lost sight of that.
Yep. 100%. I want to apologize ahead of time to any listeners if you hear some noise in the background. My neighbor is using his huge industrial backpack leaf blower that has a jet engine on it. So when I get a moment, I will close the door behind me in case that is distracting anyone. Okay, let's get on to item number 2, and this is from Fox News. Schumer silent on Biden oil purchase after blasting Trump for bailout of big oil. So just a little news item that you guys might have missed this week. The Department of Energy announced a purchase of 4.65 million barrels of oil Monday to replenish the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which has been tapped by the Biden administration to assist with high gas prices. The department bought the oil for an average price of $77 per barrel. 1 barrel of oil is 42 gallons, in case you didn't know. During the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, Trump's administration sought to include $3 billion for purchasing oil to replenish the SPR at the low price in the $2 trillion pandemic stimulus package. Oil was roughly $30 a barrel in March 2020 as prices trended sharply downward as demand declined because everybody was on lockdown, right? So the Trump administration's proposal was ultimately excluded from the final draft of legislation following significant pushback from Democrats. Schumer referred nonetheless to the Trump administration's request as, quote, a $3 billion bailout for big oil. So if trying to top off our Strategic Petroleum Reserve at less than half the price we have now was a bailout for big oil, then, what is Biden trying to do now? Now, before I'm going to go to you, Linnea, and Keely, our producer, if you could show a couple slides that Anthony was kind enough to provide this week. This is a slide of the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve level. That little white box in there, if you're watching on YouTube and Rumble, that is the span of time during the Trump administration. You can see how well stocked the SPR was back then. And then if you, and now it has been depleted big time by Joe Biden. And then if you go to slide 5, Keely, this is the commercial crude oil stockpile. Again, You can see that what it was like in the Trump administration and what's it like now. So, Linnea, you're trained as a petroleum engineer. You do keep a good eye on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Is this a huge debacle, or are we making too much of it?
In terms of, I mean, well, one, what's the point of having a strategic reserve if you don't keep it filled up and you're not using it for like emergencies, right? You're just drawing it down basically so that you can get gas prices down, but it didn't even really work.
Get votes. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't even really work. I think we're required by law or some kind of an international agreement to have 90 days at least of crude stored in the SPR. I think we've been below that for a while now. I'm not entirely sure. I know that when Biden was first drawing down, we were pretty narrowly above that limit. We had like 120 days. I'm pretty sure we're below that now. And what is it? He's buying like 4 million barrels to put back in there. And if you bring up that red chart again, where the major y-axis marks are in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions, it looks like. So yeah, I'm not too impressed with any kind of additions that the Biden administration is looking to make. I mean, good. We have our Congress agrees to sales and drawdowns pretty well in advance. Some of what we saw, the declines during the Trump administration and some of the declines during the Biden administration as well, were agreed to back in like 2014 or something. Obviously, the major drawdowns that Biden pushed were, him wanting to try to bring prices down. But yeah, it's not good. I'll tell you that. Is it the end of the world? It could be a serious problem if we get into a major conflict with, I don't know, Iran or Russia or China or something. That could be a pretty major problem. We import a pretty good amount of crude oil. Our exports are usually like refined petroleum products, and our refinery capacity is pretty well tapped out at this point. So we're in a pretty big bind from all directions on this. I mean, yeah. What is it? Really good economic advice to buy high and sell low.
And
Is
sell
that?
low, yeah, that's the old saying. The idea that Trump was a payoff for big oil. You got to realize that some oil companies, they're producing oil at $30 a barrel. Prices were low back then, and production was low, relatively low accordingly, because, well, they weren't producing as much when prices are low. It's not economic for them to do so. And he was going to pay off big oil by buying oil almost at a loss from them. And instead, Biden buys it at a huge profit. They're producing more oil than ever. He sold off our strategic reserve that was supposed to be there for times of war, not to buy votes just before the 2022 election. And now he's stocking it back at double the price. And we don't have the reserves that we need if we have a conflict, like you said, Linnea. And Schumer, the hypocrisy is rife. Schumer is silent on this. Schumer, as far as Schumer is concerned, President Biden will go down as one of the greatest presidents in history. So every move he makes is brilliant, and any move Trump made was a disaster. That's Schumer's take on things.
When you look at that, Anthony, when you look at that chart which you shared with us, and you see where I put the white box and where the Biden administration started, right to the right of that white box, that is by far the steepest drop in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in its entire history. I mean, it was all for politics. It wasn't for an actual emergency. And it was because gas prices were going up and people were getting mad about it. because of the overall inflation, which was created by this administration's policies. And now we're going to have to claw our way back to the top at twice the price from whence we emptied it. It's just insane.
It is. And, the United States consumes an average of about 20 to 21 million barrels per day of petroleum. And so, them releasing this isn't going to make a big permanent dent on gas prices. It may be made a little bit. Maybe speculators, saw this as a positive thing and so forth for petroleum futures and that kind of stuff. But, it really didn't do anything except provide a photo op for Biden and his crew. That's really all it was. And the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is exactly that. It's a reserve for emergencies. What if we had a major terrorist event of some kind and they blew up all the oil wells in Texas or something like that, or Louisiana? And all of a sudden, the United States government, in mobilizing its forces, is finding itself short of petroleum. That's what this is for. Don't sell it off. It's just stupid.
I think it's important, it's instructive to look at when that sell down occurred. Look at where that white box ends, just before the 2022 elections. That's when it happened. It was purely political. It's no coincidence that it happened then. And did it have an effect? For about 2 weeks, it lowered the gas prices about 5 cents a gallon. After they had gone up 100%, almost doubled in Biden's first 2 years of office. So you tell me what benefit it was. Now we're very low. He's adding a little bit back at double the price, and we're supposed to applaud him. Oh, an energy genius. By the way, a lot of that oil that we sold to our good friends in China and elsewhere, people who really have our best interest in mind. So it's just one more. It's just one more bit of evidence that Biden is he'll go down as, future historians, not present liberal historians. Future historians will look back at his administration and call it one of the worst in history. Wow. From the point of view of America's standing in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we will see, but it would just be nice if we could have sound policy instead of politics driving policy, especially with something as important as Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But anyway, moving on, I think that a lot of people aren't really covering that, so I thought it was important for us to do it. Our third item here in the crazy climate news is it's one of our favorite things to monitor, and that is from our Climate Realism site, climaterealism.com. You should definitely check that out. The I-15 battery fire is symbolic of green energy pipe dream going up in smoke. Now, this is from Charles Rotter, who also writes for the What's Up With That website. And he notes that on Friday, July 26, a long-haul truck carrying lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles and for electric power battery backup facilities overturned on I-15 between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. I used to live in Southern California. That highway is very busy, and it's pretty much the only link between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, and many, many, many cars go across it for pleasure and for commercial reasons. The truck caught fire and forced the closure first of one lane and then eventually the entirety of I-15. As described by various media outlets such as KVVU in Las Vegas and the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the accident caused a massive traffic jam, closing the highway from Friday through Monday. So, gosh, I don't know why anyone wouldn't even want to get back and forth from Vegas to Los Angeles over a weekend. No big deal. Benjamin Leffel, associate professor of public policy at UNLV, said, I've never seen anything quite like it. Many have called it the worst traffic jam of their lifetime, and I have to agree. The thing that was happening, and we're going to, I'll throw this to you, Sterling, because you're the biggest fan of electric vehicles on this program, so you need to field this one, is that when it was happening at the time, I remember seeing stories like, dude, this is out in the middle of the desert. It's 115 degrees. I've been in my car for 4 hours. The cell service is not very good. I'm going to run out of gas and then start baking out here in the sun. Now, happily, nothing serious happened. There was no loss of life in that regard. But the other thing about this, one of our friends in the climate realism community shared with me a story that showed that 4 days later, 4 days later, that car battery fire was still going. 4 days.
Yeah.
Now, say what you want about the internal combustion engine, which with combustion in the term sounds dangerous. It ain't going to burn for 4 straight days, Sterling. Yet here's our new electric future coming to us, in which a single accident with a single truck holding some batteries closes one of the most important highways in the West for days on end.
Yeah, it's even worse than you described, Jim. First off, I'm not sure we can say that no one has died. It hasn't been covered if they had, but you had people camping, literally having to camp overnight in their cars in that heat. And the solution that was finally come up with by the hazmat team that was called in, because the firefighters, first it took them a long time to get to it because, well, you had all that traffic, right? That right there shows why a good SUV or truck with big tires and 4-wheel drive is ideal. You screw gas mileage and you get off the highway and you go around that thing. Anyway, they're stuck out there in the heat overnight. Some of them lacking, they didn't travel carrying a lot of water. It's not like, oh, it's a camping trip. So we packed the old cooler. They're heading to Vegas. They're going to live in luxury for a weekend. So it was a disaster. And so the hazmat team gets there, and what happens? They don't put out the fire. They say, we can't put out the fire. They bulldoze the vehicle, the trailer of the vehicle. They push it 100 feet into the desert away from the highway, and they build a berm around it. And they decided, we're just going to have to let it burn out. Well, in a regular truck fire, it burns out largely when the fuel is burned. Not a lithium ion battery. They just keep going. Lithium ion batteries are the Energizer bunny of fire fuel. They just keep going and going and going, spewing toxic gases all the while that no one wants to get around unless they've got a hazmat suit with extreme heat. And these batteries are for cars that people want to. You want that in your driveway? You want that in your garage? Not me. They're also the batteries for backup power system energy, right? The wind's not blowing. You turn on those battery packs in that big building built for battery packs, and you get what happened in South Korea or Australia or San Diego when those buildings catch fire. And once again, you don't have battery backup for days, and no one's putting out the fire.
Right.
It's the Keystone Cops couldn't design a worse energy system than our politicians are doing right now.
Well, the Keystone Cops at least were consistent in their incompetence. The politicians are all over the road.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad we added it to our rundown today, because it does kind of, Linnea, does kind of dovetail into kind of the theme of today's podcast, and that is basically when green energy dreams smash head on into the reality of the world, and a lithium battery fire that burns for days and days and days on end, seems to be one of those examples.
Can you imagine if Congress, by the way, had been having a junket going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas when this happened? There would be bills flying in Congress to get rid of batteries and things, right, because we can't have the stuff that had been Congress that was inconvenienced.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know what you want me to add. I think we got a lot covered there. I mean, I'm probably less harsh in general on EVs than most of the people on this panel, but you can't go mandating this stuff. It's clearly, there's major problems that need to be worked out on the technology side. Most companies outside of Tesla don't seem to even be trying all that hard. They're just blasting these things onto the line, and it's just you can't plan infrastructure around hopes and dreams, right? And that's what we're doing right now.
That is what we're doing. Yeah. And I've said on this podcast several times, if electric vehicles weren't mandated, they'd probably be banned because of the dangers they pose. I can't think of another product that's allowed to be this dangerous and to be encouraged by government. It's just crazy. All right.
They're the lawn darts of vehicles.
Hey, I played with lawn darts when I was a kid. I'm fine.
I did
can't be mean
too.
to lawn darts.
I did. Well, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
All right.
But I could buy a bomb. I mean, an electric vehicle. I can no longer buy a lawn dart.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to two quick memes that we found this week, and we thought you guys might find amusing. This first one, I found this one on Twitter. It's Noah's Ark, and it says God saved steak, not lettuce, which is a darn good point. I never thought of it that way. And this is from our friend Chris Martz on Twitter. He says, they say a picture paints 1,000 words, saving the planet one forest logged at a time. Yet another topic we cover on this podcast quite often is the environmental destruction of so-called green energy. You have to clear cut forests, especially on mountaintops, in order to install these bird and bat choppers. So yeah, good point, Chris Martz. All right, let's get into our main topic, which we like to be topical around here. And the Olympics are going on. So these are the Green Olympics that has many athletes seeing red. The first one, this was actually pretty hilarious. Even some of my friends, hanging out had noticed this and talked about it and were pretty amazed by it. But from our friends at The Guardian, the alarmist newspaper, climate crisis to blame for delay to triathlon, say Paris Olympic organizers. Organizers have blamed the climate crisis for the postponement of the men's triathlon on Tuesday this week. Paris 2024 said the equivalent of the annual rainfall for July had fallen on the city Friday and Saturday, leading to a higher than permitted levels of E. coli entering the Seine and forcing it to delay the race for safety reasons. After a 2:30 a.m. inspection, the men's triathlon has been rescheduled. The women's race was also rescheduled. Organizers faced a barrage of questions whether their ambition to stage a made-for-TV triathlon had put spectacular image of Paris above athlete safety. Quote, "We are living in the 21st century, where unfortunately there are far more meteorological events that happen which are beyond the control of organizers," said Aurélie Merle, the Paris 2024 director of sports. Quote, "We've gone from heavy rain to extreme heat in very few days, so it's actually hard to control how it can affect the quality of the river." Now, guys, I read that far into the story because I think this is pretty darn funny. First of all, it's poop jokes galore, right? So you can go for that for ages. But it's also the idea that in the 21st century, that we are seeing more weather events that are beyond the control of humans, which assumes that humans had control over the weather events of the 20th century and maybe the 19th century too. Again, Anthony, this isn't a cult, but I guess if we didn't have the Industrial Revolution and we all listened to Greta, the River Seine would not be teeming with E. coli and would be safe to swim.
Well, since you mentioned poop jokes, I want to point out this is France, so this is poop de grace. That's what this is. Anyway, this is something I coined a phrase this week in an article that got published on Red State and other media outlets about the California wildfires. What this is something called causational shoehorning. They try to shoehorn in some kind of climate connection to virtually any event out there that seems even slightly abnormal or surprising, completely forgetting the fact that weather by its nature is random and chaotic. They just see this as climate change. So they try to shoehorn in some explanation, and they fail miserably at
it. But it's not. It is climate shoehorning, just like Anthony says. But the story is incomplete. It's actually worse than that. The storms happened recently. The Seine has had high E. coli levels for decades. France knew this going in, and they spent weeks in advance. No storms coming, no sudden wash of E. coli. I guess a lot of people were pooping upstream before the storms came or something. No, They were trying to clean this thing for weeks and saying they didn't know if they'd be able to hold it in there. The athletes were worried that they wouldn't be able to hold it in there. And that's before the storms came. So it's not like it was a pristine waterway before these storms came.
That's for sure.
Look, people, throw things into the Seine. There's boat traffic constantly, tourism, and I know I was one of them last year. So you got oil slick, spills, gasoline, you got all sorts of things. It was an idiotic idea for them to say, we're going to do a triathlon, and part of it's going to be in the Seine. No, you do those things in pristine waters, not commercial streams. And right. This was a flawed idea from the start. And now that they have had to delay it, and there's a possibility they may have to cancel the triathlon because of this, they're trying to blame it on climate change when they were having problems before there was any heat dome, any hot, any rain. The Seine already had high levels of E. coli in it.
Yeah, as one of our commenters said, it's been an open sewer for 300 years. The idea that they should have scheduled the triathlon in there. Yeah, I think they had it almost clean enough, I guess. They had treated it. They'd done all this work, and then it rained heavily for 2 days. That happens. It's summertime. It's weather, and it's not unique to the 21st century that you might have a couple days of heavier rain than normal, right? I mean, it's just this idea that everything, as you said, Anthony, everything is blamed on humans changing the weather because of the way we live our lives, when that is absolutely not true.
But I'm unconvinced they had it almost clean. I think that they just didn't care whether the athletes got sick. Do you trust what the French government said about it being almost clean? Or do you think, by God, this is where we've said it, they're going to swim?
Yeah, I'd have to wonder how you would even clean a water system like that. As one of our commenters, Vince Wilson, pointed out, this was also a problem in Rio because the water in Rio was so gross. Just stop trying to have it in natural bodies of water. What are you doing? You have an Olympic swimming pool. Just go there. Stop it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm reminded of what went on during the Dust Bowl days in the United States, where we had traveling snake oil salesmen set up these portable wagons that would exude fumes into the atmosphere. And they would say, we're going to make it rain. We're going to charge these poor farmers that are losing their crops and their livelihood, each one a certain amount of money, and then we're going to make it rain. But, the rain's going to come 3 or 4 days down the road. And by that time, they've packed up the wagon and moved on. It's just the same kind of thing in climate science and in the way that they look at the weather. It's almost like, they're willing to buy the snake oil for the belief that man can change the climate if we just do this.
Right.
Anthony, you're giving a bad name to snake oil salesmen. I think that's very unfair. You remember according to the French, during the days of snake oil salesmen, that's when we had control over the weather. So, sacrifices of virgins and volcanoes and rain dances and snake oil salesmen evidently worked before, because they said we can no longer control this stuff.
Yeah. But when you're asked to give money to a climate cause, it's essentially the same thing going back to these shysters and these wagons in the Midwest in the Dust Bowl days. You're giving money to change the weather, and it's not going to happen.
100%. Yeah. But, that's getting into more of our items about the Olympics coming up, is that the Olympics were changed this year, how they operate the entire Olympic Village and everything else, with the idea that this will help us control the weather for the rest of this century. So we have here a story. Yeah, I know. Roll your eyes, Anthony. It's going to get worse. Strap in. All right. There's a story from Essential Sports. Paris Olympics issues continue to pile on as South Korean swimming stars ditch village in frustration. Something has to be done. Now, French authorities have emphasized their efforts to make the games more sustainable, saying, quote, "We have looked to reduce everything that can be reduced for games that emit less carbon and consume fewer resources. And while this eco-friendly approach is admirable, it seems the athletes are paying the price for it at the behest of their comfort." According to Reuters, 6 South Korean swimmers were forced to vacate the Olympic Village. Swimmers Kim Woo-min and Hwang Sun-woo are among those who have complained about the stuffy conditions on the buses, electric buses, with taped windows and a lack of air conditioning. Hwang Sun-woo described the bus as a sauna. Quote, "It's cooler outside than it is in the bus. And to make matters worse, the journey to the arena took more than an hour despite the distance being only 12 kilometers. And now the team has moved to a hotel just 5 minutes from the where the swimming events will be held. And the head of the Korean Swimming Federation said, we just want to make sure that they will be at least a bit more comfortable." So, there's your green doctrine being imposed on these games. And we're going to get into a little bit more of it, including the food. But again, Sterling, this is your favorite, electric buses.
Unair conditioned, sealed, the windows are taped up, sealed electric buses that are taking an hour or more to go from the Olympic Village to where the swimming event takes place. It focused on the South Koreans because they were the smartest ones. They were the ones that got on it first. But after they moved to the nearby hotels, those that still had open rooms, other swim teams started making the migration to get nearer the event. It was, look, this whole Olympics has been madness. This is the problem with politicians. It's the problem with politicians designing an electric grid. It's the problem with politicians trying to manage a sporting event. This is supposed to be a celebration of athletic prowess, an international celebration, not a showcase for green technologies, for sustainability. If you want sustainability, everyone competes in their home and we'll just do the timing. And the guy that's swimming in Los Angeles, if his time is quicker on the 100 than the guy that's swimming in Beijing, well, then we award it to them because at least they didn't travel. If that's what if the green thing is the most important thing, which evidently the French think it is. So they built an awful village. They run awful buses. We're going to get into the food. Yeah. Look, I've seen a lot of French cuisine, those little bitty, it looks good on a plate. People take their pictures and put it on Facebook. I don't do that. But you know what? None of that food like that looks like to me. It's very filling. I get a bite of pate and a green leaf. I don't think I'm going to go run. Now, I'm not going to go run 100 yards anyway, but I don't think many people are going to go run 100 yards on that stuff.
Well,
so this story isn't surprising. What's only surprising is that the media is finally actually covering it. What surprises me really is that they weren't blasting the whole idea from the start. The idea that they would live in an unair conditioned hut. And then you see all the Western world bringing in their air conditioners for their athletes, right? Yeah. So the poor Africans and the people from South America and the people from Southeast Asia who can't afford to bring their own air conditioning units, they are disadvantaged relative to the Western world. Now that's green colonialism right there.
Yeah. Well, real quick, I just want to say, guys, this wasn't about climate change, right? Like this is, we all know that this was just France being cheap and that they're just greenwashing it. Right? Yeah. Like that's what this was. Paris is trying not to bankrupt themselves.
Well, the Olympic Village cost $1.6 billion, which is in my notes,
but it would have cost $1.7 billion.
It's not. Look, to hell with Team Korea and Team USA. You guys need to pull for Team Earth. And if sitting in a sealed electric bus is what it takes to be on Team Earth, you're just gonna have to suck it up. And, that's not too much to ask. Well, except for the organizers of the Olympics. They get to stay in hotels with air conditioning. But,
or palaces, right? The presidential palace has guest rooms. I suppose a lot of people are staying there.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you they're not eating wheatgrass and
some of them might be.
Some of them might be, yeah.
But my suspicion is they have larger meals than they're trying to foist off on their athletes and but they call it gourmet, so that's okay. Right. We're bringing in the finest French chefs to feed you a meal that doesn't fill a quarter of a plate.
Right. Well, let me move on here. And the reason we're bringing this up is not just to point it out and to laugh and have fun with it, but it's to point out actually that this is the future that the green globalists want for all of us. It's just in a controlled micro environment, and it's a disaster. So what do you think it's going to be when they try to impose it on the whole world? So the Paris Olympics, this is from the Washington Post. Paris Olympics touted climate-friendly food, which we hear a ton about, and athletes demanded more meat. Now, the Paris Olympic Committee actually put together a 42-page document. It's a PowerPoint, really, outlining their sustainable food plan. They pledged at least a 50% reduction, and if possible, if they could pull it off, 60% reduction of animal products, meaning meat, fish, dairy, and eggs, in all the food provided, and not just to the athletes, but officials and attendees as well. And that's going over about as well at these games as a male boxer beating the crap out of a female boxer. So
I'm gonna have a Marie Antoinette moment here and say, let them eat bugs.
But that's, you know what? It's not included in this. I searched for the word bugs. I didn't see it, but maybe that'll be in Los Angeles in 2028. So, but chefs with Michelin stars helped design the menus. They emphasized all the plant-based and locally sourced offerings to minimize their carbon footprint. The Paris 2024 food vision included commitments to provide locally sourced seasonal food with less animal protein and more plant-based ingredients. However, because of the complaints, there has been, quote, a reinforcement in their animal proteins. They surely trucked in, this didn't come in on an ox cart or on somebody's back, 700 kilos of eggs, a ton of meat to meet the demands of athletes who we place at the heart of the 2024 experience. And on top of that, as just like the U.S., Team USA brought in their own air conditioners when Paris announced months ago that we will not have any air conditioning in the Olympic Village. And they started bringing in their own food. The Australians, I know we have a lot of Australians watching this show, hardy folk they are. They brought in 3 tons of tuna by themselves, 3 tons of tuna, 10,000 muesli bars, 2,400 meat pies. That sounds great. And they also brought along 3 baristas who are expected to make about 20,000 shots of coffee during the game. So, attaboy, Australia. I love it. So, yeah, I mean,
No
this
mention
is
of
just
Vegemite.
and as I mean, this is just another failure. And again, this mirrors what the global green agenda is for the rest of us. And if they can't make it happen, they can't make it work in a controlled, small environment with all the money in the world and all the social pressure in the world. How is it ever going to work on a large scale?
Now, it's just a perfect example of what the left wants us to be in the future. And it's not about it making sense or being appropriate for the venue or tasteful, any of those things. It's all about what we think you should be and be doing and eating and consuming. They want to control your lives. It's just that simple. And it's very obvious how that's being done here in the Paris Olympics. They wanted to control the lives of the people that went there. They gave no consideration whatsoever to the sports and the competitions and the needs of those things whatsoever. It was all about the agenda. We had one comment on here a little bit ago that basically the Olympics used to be about world unity through spirited competition. Now it's just one big propaganda machine, and that's the truth.
If the left really has their way, they'll do in the future what I suggested, which was everyone will compete in their home country against each other, and we'll just compare times. Or even better for the left, because they don't even want us traveling to the athletic stadiums in our own communities. What we'll be doing is just competing electronically with little handheld, it'd be like one of those Madden football games. It'll be the Madden Olympics. People will be there with their thumbs moving I'm running faster than the other person. Click, 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 click. Because your finger can tap faster. So you're moving in the false, the virtual track field event, the hurdles. Oh, I jumped. I cleared the hurdle. It's just, everything can't be about climate, folks. It's not the only existential threat in the world, or even an existential threat. By the way, the people that use that phrase, Biden and his ilk, they don't understand what existential means. They should check a philosophy textbook. But it should not dictate everything we do. We should be able to have athletic events without worrying about our carbon footprint.
You know, I just love this comment by Chris Shattuck here that was just up, where he says they're going to use models, to stimulate the Olympics in the future. I mean, we should get them onto RCP 8.5 for competition. That'll really juice their competition up in those Olympic models.
Yeah, you don't have to do the Olympic event. You just put in the data for everyone's training and just run a model on it
Yeah.
and see who would win.
Right.
Yeah.
Terrible. Okay.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. So okay, just
You know,
one
this
last thing.
this whole show
Yeah.
could have been one big crazy climate news of the week.
No,
It is.
it is all crazy climate news. You're right. So yeah, just one last thing, and then we're going to get to questions. If you have questions about any of this or any just general climate science questions, we get a lot of those each week. Go ahead and pop them into the chat. Linnea will curate those, and we'll get them up and get them answered. But just one more, if you indulge, there's one more story I wanted to check out, and this is from Newsweek. This is pretty funny. Yeah, you see a picture, and so. Like I mentioned, the Olympic Village, $1.6 billion to build it. The athletes, at least those with means, are abandoning it in droves. U.S. tennis star Coco Gauff posted a TikTok video complaining that there's 10 girls sharing 2 bathrooms, and so she bugged out. Track athlete Sherry Hawkins complained of no privacy for changing, and her room had no curtains. And just the quote here is that the beds are very hard. Terrible. Very, very hard. We arrived so tired in the end, you just lie down and fall asleep immediately, said Spanish gymnast Ana Perez. And she also mentioned she was afraid to spill coffee on her bed, fearing that it would disintegrate because the beds are made of recycled cardboard and not wood. And so, just again, this is, I just think it's really a microcosm of where this agenda will ultimately end up, or at least where it's aspirationally wanting to end up. And that is the ruling class. And you would think Olympic athletes would be kind of the ruling class. No, they are you are also serfs. You will live much more miserable lives while they get to enjoy all of the stuff of modern life while you don't. And they are deadly serious about these things. And it's refreshing actually to see, celebrity athletes like Coco Gauff and others, basically giving the old fashioned Olympic experience about 20 minutes time, and then they bug out.
Yeah. Well, I will say I don't know if they tried to use the green excuse for the cardboard beds, but I'm pretty sure the cardboard bed is to try and keep them behaving at night in the Olympic Village. I think that's the reason why the beds are cardboard. But
they want to deny them the full Olympic Village experience. What can you say?
I saw news articles saying they had a big boom in condom sales, so I don't think that's working. It is Paris after all. And talking about sharing showers, first off, would you want to fall into bed a little bit wet on one of those beds and have it collapse onto you? Secondly, in my experience, the smells of France, they may not be bothered by athletes not getting regular showers as much as some other countries. So.
If somebody just could have served you a proper chicken fried steak in Paris, you would have a much better opinion of France. And unfortunately, you can't get a good chicken fried steak.
I had a wonderful time in France, and I ate good food. What I did not eat is small little baby portions that wouldn't serve the nutritional requirements of an infant.
Right.
Keely is in the background seething right now. She wants to jump in. So
our producer's a francophile.
I was there. Look, I stayed in a building, beautiful location, looking out into some wonderful architecture, and it was unair conditioned, and we had to sleep with the windows open. So you had all the noise, you had the heat, and I was there in July. So even when I was there in 2023, oh, by the way, the hottest year on record, according to the climate alarmist, we're sleeping with the windows open and the curtains open, so the neighbors across the street can look right into where I was sleeping, that was not the most comfortable thing for me. So,
Well,
you know,
next time we're going to get to questions here in a sec. So, but next time you go to France, Sterling, that's a bidet, not a water fountain.
no. There was no bidet where I was at.
They don't have
pretty
don't have
old
air
plumbing. It
conditioning
was
in Europe.
pretty old plumbing. I suspect it was built in the 1930s.
All right.
Though the building was hundreds of years older, I suspect the newest plumbing there was from the 30s.
Excellent. Okay. All right. We're going to get to questions here, but I just wanted to say, take this opportunity to let people know that the Heartland Institute, we're having our benefit dinner on September 13th. The one, the only, the amazing Nigel Farage is going to be our keynote speaker. He is fantastic. He is probably the leading freedom fighter in Europe. He led the effort for Brexit, which nobody thought could happen. He led the UK, the UKIP party for freedom in UK, which people thought would get crushed. And now he has the new UK Reform Party under his banner. So you will not want to miss this night. It is fantastic. It's going to be in Chicago, down at the Hilton Chicago, in downtown Chicago, in the Grand Ballroom. Absolutely historic place. So go to heartland.org and you can click on a feature there and you can get your tickets today, or a whole table for you and your friends. So definitely check that out. And we're giving the Heartland Liberty Prize to the great Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, probably the one most important institution protecting liberty in this country. So we will see you there, we hope. All right. It is time for Q&A. It is time for Linnea to let us know what the questions and answers are.
Yes, thank you. We don't have very many questions today. We had this was kind of a casual broadcast today. Nothing too crazy. This is my favorite one, though, I think of today. Can we look forward to the Strategic Wind and Solar Reserve?
They're building it all over. They're called battery farms, and they catch fire.
Yeah, I don't know how you would store wind, but some people do.
Can you imagine 90 days of battery backup for the country? What that would take?
Well, I'm unconvinced that it's physically possible. They would have to charge sometime, and if it has to be run for 90 days, madness. And I would hate to remember. Look, these battery farms, they have to keep those things air conditioned. Part of the power they generate is used just to keep them cool. And if that fails, well, you've got a mushroom cloud wherever your battery farm is.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why for a lot of those server centers and stuff, they like to try to put them in places like Wyoming and, dry places that don't get too hot, so they don't have to spend as much money on air conditioning. We've got from Mad Incraft. Wondering lately, what is the net benefit or loss of so many Southwest lawns being turned into gravel and boulders, no water use properties? I have noticed extreme heat differences between the two. Anthony, this is in your court, I think.
Well, yeah, it's pretty simple, really. If you have, I think it's called xeriscaping. If you have xeriscaped your property, you're putting down stones, gravel, rocks, that kind of stuff. It's just like concrete, it absorbs solar energy during the day and releases it at night. And so it makes your premises warmer, especially at night, which means your air conditioning has to work harder. So, from far as I'm concerned, it doesn't solve anything.
It reduces water use and increases ambient heat.
Well, yeah. So what's the better of the two,
I want grass under my feet, not stones.
Yeah. It's
and shade trees, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, are the French nuclear-powered generators not green enough to power the AC? Well, they don't really have AC in a lot of France anyway. Most of it's pretty cool until you get down into the south, but it's yeah. I answered a question similar to this with some of my friends that I was discussing the French AC problem and the nuclear. Nuclear is really good for base load, but for stuff like if you get a sudden heat wave or some other power source goes down or something, nuclear isn't terrific for reacting super fast to changes in demand, which is why one of the best, power systems is a combined nuclear with coal or gas or something like that.
I'm
Gas
looking
is the
forward to
peaking
the
fuel.
day
Yeah.
at the next Olympics when one of the countries brings a modular nuclear reactor with them to power their own air conditioners.
There is in France, like I said, I stayed in this wonderful old building in a very historic area, and the architecture there is not new. Much of it large. I mean, not a few buildings. Entire regions and neighborhoods in Paris are 200, 300 and older years old. They weren't built for air conditioning. I can't imagine the kind of physical transformation that would have to take place, not only to site the air conditioners on the leaky roofs, some of the leaky roofs that I saw, because there's no place on the ground to put them. But then really putting vents and the ductwork that you have to do to air conditioning, I just think it's not feasible, and to some extent, it would sort of mar the historic ambiance of it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good portion of the resistance to putting AC in. And plus, it's the same thing with England. They really don't need it as much. I mean, when you look at the United States on a map compared to, our latitude compared to the UK or something, they're quite a bit chillier than we are. And they don't have as much air conditioning up in like the Northeast and stuff either in the United States.
Right.
All right. Oh yeah, that's the one we just did. Here we have, while Alabama state climatologist John Christie doesn't include volcanoes in his study for climate sensitivity, do you know of any studies that attribute volcanoes to being man-made? Anybody?
The short answer for me is no, not man-made. Not that they don't. There are studies by a guy named Arthur Vitorino, a geologist, who looks at subsea volcanic activity and how that has coincided with warming. And of course, we've talked before about the Hungatonga volcano and its injection of water vapor into the atmosphere and its warming effects. But I don't know of anyone who's ever said it was man-made.
This is from our friend Stan. He says, Jim, will the banquet serve plant-based proteins?
I suppose. I don't care. I won't be eating them. But yes, we will have I think we have a vegan plate, of course. And then, I think steak might be one of them or short rib or something like that. But yeah, and actually, Keely, our producer today, visited the hotel last week, 10 days ago, to sample the food. And she thought it was fantastic. So You'll have a great meal if you come to our benefit dinner on September 13th.
But my
what you could
suspicion
do
is won't be
you could say that at the last minute that we're going to go with a plant-based menu along with a bug-based menu, and then offer everyone an upgrade, to buy steak, right? And then you get more donations that way.
I like the way you think, Anthony. That's good.
I suspect that regardless of what plate is before you, there will be no near meat. There will be no amazing protein.
No,
that's right.
Can't believe this isn't chicken.
I can't believe it's not chicken. Yeah, or the old Wendy's lady saying, "Where's the beef?" when it looks like Jell-O on her bun.
I can't believe this isn't chicken. That's the best.
Okay, this is from K1, who says, I live in Virginia. How can they possibly build these wind farms with glued together turbine blades? Well, I mean, I'm sure they're not just glued together. I'm sure the construction on them is, pretty good. It's just not good enough, unfortunately, for them. Maybe
You look at
fortunately
all the
for you guys in the
fiberglass
long
boats.
term.
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
fiberglass boats out there, are basically glued together. Fiberglass, by its nature, is glued together. It's a composite of fibers and epoxy, basically.
Right.
And so, it is not it's not that strong. It's lightweight, but it doesn't handle collisions well. I mean, anybody who's ever owned a Corvette, that had a fiberglass body understands this. So I'm not the least bit surprised that these turbine blades are shattering. It's just the nature of fiberglass.
But not just shattering. Everyone's talking about this one blade, which was a really bad event and a warning, because if it can happen to one, it can happen to the others. But they're constantly shedding. They're constantly shedding microplastics in the wind. High winds cause microplastic shedding. And if you're worried about microplastics, if you don't want them in the food chain, if you don't want them in your oceans, the idea, in Scotland, there's entire fields that we know they're no longer farmed, not because there are wind turbines there, but because there are wind turbines near there, and it shreds so much microplastics that they don't want to get into their food chain. So they stopped farming those fields. Well, we talk about microplastics in the oceans. That's happening, folks. That happens every day. Tons and tons of microplastics on the edge. And of course, they don't ever figure in the cost of these things. They don't ever figure in the cost of replacing those blades before their time.
All right. Our next question from Vince Wilson. Are we even close to making nuclear safe yet? My answer would be nuclear has been safe for decades and decades and decades.
Right. Unless you're Russian.
Look, there are sailors that have been sleeping next to nuclear bulkheads in subs for since the 50s. You look at all the nuclear plants in the world, how many of them have had accidents and how many of those have resulted in deaths, and what were the designs? And was it due to the nuclear, or was it due to the failure of human error? It's just nuclear is just about the safest energy there is.
Yeah.
This is from Steve Young. He says, question, the strategic oil reserve is for lubricants and chemicals for the defense industry, not electricity. Isn't it for making explosives? Well, the strategic reserve is for crude oil. They don't put anything else in it. It's just crude oil, and crude oil can be refined and made into other products. So I guess yes to all of the above. You can make whatever you want with it, pretty much. I would.
You know what the breakdown is for every barrel of oil? It's not all plastics or chemicals or lubricants. Some of the oil is turned into gasoline, and that's because of the nature of the refineries we have. It was never set up just for producing chemicals for the defense industry. It was to make sure we had enough energy. We could move our tanks and planes and the nation. We could keep the nation powered in times of an emergency if we went to war. So no one could it was formed after the Arab oil embargo, which was a war, and we were cut off from imports, and the government said no more, never again. We'll be beholden.
Yep, thank you. Here's from Marianne. How much U.S. money is funding the Green New Scam? Literally trillions of dollars, probably.
No. I prefer billions and billions.
Billions and billions.
It's a lot more than $1 million. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's a good accounting for it, right? No one knows, and it depends on what you throw in under the Green New Scam and how the money is spent. If you include tax credits, if you include expenses, if you include the actual subsidies for the buildings and the land and tax property tax waivers. I just don't think, and direct government spending. I don't think there's a good accounting for all of it. But I'm going to go trillions and trillions, not billions.
Yeah. It's definitely a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So it's, when people say that, we're in the pocket of big oil and big oil is bankrolling climate denial or whatever, and you look on the other side of the issue and the funding and potential funding that they have, it's not even a competition. It's pathetic, actually.
At least if oil were funding denial, it would be their own money. The alarmism is funded by taxpayer money, whether you like it or not.
Right. Okay, and this is our last question, and it is a big one. This is probably one that everyone is going to have to pitch in on, and that is from Jeff Sheldon Art Forms. Give me an idea or tactic how we can save our nation. And I'm going to say, from the energy perspective, we need, as Vince Wilson says here, drill baby drill. That's definitely, we need to unleash oil production in this country again. Production is doing all right, but long term, this is the kind of thing that you need to plan long term for. Stuff like refinery capacity doesn't go up in a single presidential administration's term. This is the kind of thing that you need to plan decades in advance for, and we're not doing that right now. So that would be one major tack that I would take.
More nuclear in the mix is where I would go. We got to have nuclear. Even James Hansen said this. When I was at the American Geophysical Union convention in San Francisco in 2015, I believe it was, I asked him a question about thorium and its use in nuclear reactors. And some other countries are looking into this already and doing experiments on that. And he said, yeah, we need to have nuclear in the mix going forward in our energy plans. And so, even the father of global warming thinks we need nuclear in the mix. So that's where we should be.
Yeah. And I wanted to add too, this viewer of ours, Itsy Toe, says, just prepare for minor climate change. And I would say, yeah, I mean, if you do have sea level rise in your area, whether it's due to overall sea level rise or, land sinking or anything like that, resilience to extreme weather is going to be good, whether or not it's getting worse, which it's not. Even so, infrastructure, and you need fossil fuels to do that, by the way, but good infrastructure is going to be key. So, yeah.
You need energy. You need some energy. You need some regulatory standardization. You can't have the whiplash where one administration approves a pipeline and before it can get built, the next one can cancel it. We're going to go full forward with LNG terminals, and then with a signing of a pen, that's canceled, and then you have to go to court. Big businesses don't plan on that basis.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm trying to play our outro music that to signal to everybody that we're going to wrap up the show, and I won't sing it, but we are going to wrap up the show. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening to this podcast today on YouTube, on Rumble, and on X. I want to thank our streaming partners, CFACT, JunkScience.com, ClimateDepot.com, and What'sUpWithThat.com. Of course, I want to thank our wonderful panelists, Anthony Watts, Linnea Lueken, and Sterling Burnett, and definitely not least, but just happens to be last, Keely Jukala, who is producing this show in the background. Thank you, everyone, for being with us on this Friday, and we will be back next Friday. Bye-bye.